Well, I know there's some familiar faces out there, even if I can't see them. But for those of you who I haven't met, I'm Noreen Cassidy. I'm the Director of College Counseling. As you can see, I'm joined by my colleagues in the College Counseling Office and a wonderful panel of college admission representatives who will be sharing some valuable information and insights with you. This is my 18th, yikes, junior college night. But I still get really excited each time we kick off the college search and application process with a new group of students. So welcome to the class of 2022. We're particularly excited this year because we've been hearing a lot about you, all good, I might add, working side by side with your class dean, Mrs. Johnson. So, we feel like to some extent we've been getting to know you over the course of these last couple of years. We hope that you're looking forward to getting started as well, even though we recognize that there can be a lot of questions, maybe even some nerves surrounding this process. I always say that one of the most common answers to questions about the college search and application process is it depends. And probably that's more true this year than ever before. Having said that, though, 8 months ago, we really had no idea what this fall would bring for the class of 2020, but I'm happy to say that the vast majority of them are on their intended college campuses, looking forward to coming home next week for the Thanksgiving break. At the same time, the colleges have done an amazing job of providing opportunities for our current seniors to conduct an effective college search. At this point, several hundred applications have already been submitted, and some of our seniors even have some acceptances under their belts. We could not do the work that we do without the support and the transparency of our colleagues on the college side, and I'm delighted to have 4 of the best with us tonight, all of whom have spent time on our campus and have gotten to know our students. So with that, I'd like to introduce them. Maybe you guys could, well, your names are there, but maybe you could give a little wave. Jeff Gallant began his career in college admission in 2002 at Stonehill College in Massachusetts. He's been at Boston College for the last 16 years, where he currently serves as Associate Director. Jeff is going to share some information about the current landscape of college admission and recent trends. After graduating from Rhodes College in Memphis, Tennessee, Lauren Sefton joined the admission office where she currently serves as Associate Director. Lauren is going to be providing you with some factors to consider as you begin your search. Lowell Tillett graduated from Wake Forest University in North Carolina and serves in their admission office as Assistant Dean of Admission. He is going to be talking about the personal components of an application and how they're reviewed by college admission committees. And then finally, after graduating from Rollins College in Winter Park, Florida, Francisco Venegas joined the admission staff there, where he currently serves as Senior Assistant Director. He will be talking about the academic components of the application. Before we hand it off to Jeff, just some brief information about who we are. As I mentioned, I'm in my 19th year at MBS. Prior to coming here, I too worked in college admission, primarily at NYU and at Fordham University. You may have noticed that we're down a counselor tonight. I'm sad to say that Mrs. Goldberg came down with a stomach bug last night and is very sorry not to be here. She joined our staff last year. However, at that time, she was not new to MBS. She had been a longtime member of the history faculty and as dean for the classes of 2012 and 2016. And we were thrilled to welcome her back. Mrs. Johnson.
Thank you, Ms. Cassidy. Good evening, everyone. I know that I am not a new face to you this evening. I've been fortunate to have the role of being your grade dean for the past couple of years. And as Ms. Cassidy mentioned, it's a really exciting time for me to embark on this process with you so that I can share kind of my other side of what I do on campus. I was talking to a couple of students this week about that it's hard to believe that it's already time for us to begin this process, because I remember climbing up the mountain at Camp Burney in the heat. And so it's hard to believe that you're already juniors, but welcome to the college process. We're excited to get started with you. A little bit more about me. This is my 5th year at MBS, and prior to MBS, similar to my colleagues here, I worked in college admission. I had over 10 years of experience in college admission for working for small liberal arts colleges, in addition to large state institutions, including my alma mater, which is North Carolina State University. Before MBS, I was also director of college counseling at an independent school in Connecticut. So we are excited to have you this evening. I'm excited about this process. I love doing what I do because there's so much self-discovery that happens throughout. And so keeping an open mind to this process and recognizing that we have a lot of outstanding resources for you that you'll hear about this evening, we're excited to kind of embark on this with you. And now I'll turn it over to Lauren.
Great. Thank you so much, Lindsay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Lauren Lasky. I am also an associate director of college counseling here at MBS. I know that, again, even though I can't see any faces, I think some of my advisees are here tonight. So thank you. And I'm looking forward to getting to know the rest of you all who I haven't met yet. As Ms. Cassidy said early on, I have heard a lot of great things about you from the class dean, Mrs. Johnson. So looking forward to getting to know you all better over the course of the next year or so. I also worked in college admissions. I was working at Kenyon College out in Gambier, Ohio. Before that, I had been working at a college access program in a rural southwestern part of Virginia. And I'm now in my 4th year here at MBS and have enjoyed every minute of it. I know you all, the main, pull, I guess, tonight is hearing from our college reps, so I want to let them jump into it. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Gallant at Boston College, and we'll talk to you all in a little bit.
Once again, I'm Jeff Gallant, Associate Director of Undergraduate Admission at Boston College. I have been reading applications for Morristown Bayard since 2004, and during that time, Morristown Bayard has been very good to Boston College. Obviously, we're not the right fit for every student, but the students that have gone on to BC after successful experiences at Morristown Bayard have done really well, and it's been a good fit for them. And if you don't mind, I might just brag for a second. Each year, we have 4 undergraduate colleges at Boston College. Each year, each college can nominate a student for a prestigious award we have called the Finnegan Award. And the Morrissey College of Arts and Sciences nominee this past year was a Morristown Bayard graduate. So students have done really well, and I'm glad to be able to represent Boston College tonight. So I've been charged with sort of an update on the landscape and what's going on, and just a couple of things that I want to quickly talk about before I hand it over to my colleagues. Certainly testing. That's been a big change this year. I have a couple comments about that. How we're reaching students through visits and other methods. And then just want to sketch out the timeline. It feels like a different timeline this year in terms of the process, and it might have ramifications for you next year. But thank you, for being here and trying to learn more about the college search process remotely. Testing, COVID-19 has disrupted our lives in many ways, but certainly a student's ability to take standardized testing. So many schools, including mine, Boston College, traditionally use standardized testing in very significant ways and as part of our admissions process. And we made the decision to go test optional. As you continue to think about your options for college, I think a key question to ask is, how long has the school committed to being test optional or test blind? Some schools have made a multi-year commitment to being test optional, so that would impact everyone on this call. My institution, Boston College, has only made the commitment for this year for the class of 2021. So juniors, unless something changes, you should plan to test. And we're a school that super scores both the SAT and the ACT. I'm happy to talk more about testing later on. But that's the plan when it comes to Boston College. Other schools you may be looking at have made the commitment, like I said, to be test optional for a couple of years here. What you should think about too is just the other factors that replace the testing piece, and so I'll have some other colleagues will go into that. I'll just say the COVID section of the Common App, which is new, where students can talk about how COVID has sort of disrupted their lives. I think students have utilized that very responsibly and effectively, so it's not complaining, it's giving us context. I would say just for this year, if you find it interesting, so far we've had about 55% of our applicants not submit testing, compared to 45 submitting testing. And as we get closer to the January 1st deadline, I think we'll see that gap increase. So we have more non-test takers this year than test takers. And I'll just say BC, like other colleges that have only made the commitment to this 1 year, obviously if COVID continues to interrupt our lives and make it difficult for you to test into 2021, certainly we'll rethink our policy. So that's something to monitor. And that's going to be sort of my word of my remarks is monitor. That'll be just something to watch here over the next couple of months and into 2021. And certainly, I think my colleagues are going to highlight ways that schools are replacing that testing piece in their review. Visiting. We really had to scramble last spring. Think about all the admitted students from regular decision that plan to use the month of April to visit colleges and universities and do admitted student programs, which are just great opportunities and great celebrations for students and families before they deposit on or before May 1st. And many schools around the country, that's the date you need to make up your mind. You need to choose your college, communicate to your schools where you're going on or before May 1st. We weren't able to hold those programs on campus. It's sort of like buying a house, but you don't get to do a final walkthrough. So that was nerve-wracking on this side as well. But I think the legacy of it that you can benefit from is, we created programming, virtual programming, to replace those in-person open house sessions. And that continued in the fall. And so on social media, there's a lot of great content that you can take advantage of from your homes. For Boston College, I'll just single out our YouTube channel. Go to the video section. You might have to scroll down a little bit, but we have tons of programs and panels featuring administrators, students, faculty, and the programming gets very specific. We have current student panels on the experience just being from New Jersey. So you can find a lot of good content on social media that was designed for last year's seniors, but also we've done programming throughout the fall. I think colleges are very anxious to be able to meet with you on campus. So it'll be interesting in 2021. Certainly it needs to be safe, but I think we really want to try to get students back on campus in the spring if possible. So juniors, there might be some opportunities to visit, and schools might have increased programming opportunities this spring and summer. And traditionally for my institution, we usually visit high schools in the fall. Maybe there'll be more spring travel if it's safe to come visit you at your high schools. But certainly there might also be virtual opportunities as well. And then the last thing I want to talk about is sort of the timeline this year, because I think it's a little bit different of a timeline than in the past. And I'll begin by talking about the class of 2020. I think there was a lot of buzz in the media about the impact that the class of 2020 would have on the class of 2021 and potentially the class of 2022's process. I'll just say at Boston College, we're not seeing that. As students tried to make their decision last spring and into last summer, they had a couple options, right? You deposit at one of the schools you're admitted. You take a gap year, which means you're not depositing anywhere. You're sort of a free agent, and you'd go back into the pool this year. Or you postpone your enrollment, where you deposit, you pay an enrollment fee, and you sort of press pause on your Boston College experience. The media talked a lot about students taking gap years. In the end, I don't know how many students took advantage of that, because while the media was talking a lot about it, when we were counseling students about that decision and families, that seemed like the least desirable option, because back in the spring, if you took a gap year, what were you going to do? Traditional gap year programs didn't look like they were going to happen. Even getting a job to defray the cost of education seemed unlikely. So we were counseling students, so you're going to not really have anything or much to do this year, and you're going to go back into a process with students in the class of 2021 who are in school, whether it's traditional, remote, or hybrid, but they're going to be taking classes. And so I think that discouraged a lot of students from taking gap years. At Boston College, we didn't see too many students postpone their enrollment. Harvard made some news by reporting that a significant percentage of their freshman class was postponing their enrollment. I haven't heard anything that's impacting their process at this point. Even if that is, there's some other factors in play right now. There's been recent articles, we're seeing it at Boston College, we're seeing fewer international students apply than in the past, and I think that stems from a variety of reasons. We don't have the most robust international student populations, about 6 or 7%, as compared to some of our peer institutions. But say there is an influx of postponed enrollments at some schools, that might be offset by a decrease in international students. So I guess my point with that is, for the class of 2021 and the class of 2022, I don't think it's going to be any less competitive, but I don't think it's going to be outrageously more competitive either, because of the influence of earlier classes, if that makes sense. There was an article the other day that the Common Application, which is the main application for a lot of schools, they've seen an 8% drop in submitted applications as of November 2nd. But that, I think, could be misleading too. A number of schools with early November 1st deadlines pushed their deadlines back to the middle of the month, the middle of November. So this data was captured November 2nd. And we have early decision at Boston College. For early decision 1, we're actually up 200 applications this year. So I think it's going to be similar in terms of application volume this year and next year. But I think it's a little bit of a shift. I think we see students maybe even applying closer to the deadline, which you don't want to get too close to it, because sometimes technology, if there's going to be a technology issue, it's usually the day before the deadline. So try not to wait till then. The Common App sometimes crashes. Things happen, and it causes a lot of undue stress for students and families. So try not to do that. But I think it's just a shift in cycle. And something that we saw last year, who knows, may continue. There was significant waitlist activity last year for schools, all types of schools. And it'll be interesting to see if that plays out again this year and next year. And I think sort of tied to that is, we can talk a little bit more about early admission plans. I think if you're new to this has become a really confusing part of this process. You want to just keep the vocabulary terms action and decision straight, and maybe one of my colleagues is going to expand on that, or we can at the end. But Boston College is early decision, so it's binding. So if you apply and you're admitted, you're saying you're going to withdraw any pending applications and you're going to go to my school because it's early decision. I wonder, and I don't have any knowledge of this, it's still a bit early to see what schools are going to do for early decision. That'll come in the next week or two. But will there be an urge to take a larger percentage of the overall class through early decision? At Boston College last year, with our first year of early decision, while the acceptance rates were higher, 38% of students were admitted early decision 1 and 2, versus 26% overall, and at regular decision, that was also 26%. So there was an advantage for some students to apply early and to make that binding commitment. But those statistics are balanced against the fact that 1,300 of our 2,300 new freshmen were regular decision applicants. So they didn't make a binding commitment to Boston College, and they picked BC after weighing all their offers of admission and choosing BC. That number was about 40% of the class was ED. Does that number tick up at BC or other schools this year? because of the still sort of unpredictability of COVID and student behavior, applicant behavior. Again, like I said, it's worth monitoring. But you're in a good place. You have a terrific college counseling office. I think everybody on your campus, faculty, administration, teachers, take the process of supporting students through the college search process very seriously. And so please treat them as the valued resource they are to sort of figure out when and where you want to apply as you try to finalize your college list this spring and into the summer. Thank you for listening to me. I hope to answer your questions later on. At this point, I think I'm going to turn it over to Lauren, who's going to talk a little bit more about the college search process.
Thanks so much, Jeff, and welcome everybody. Again, my name is Lauren Sefton, and I am a New Jersey native. I'm originally from Scotch Plains, New Jersey. Went down to Memphis, Tennessee to attend Rhodes College, fell in love with the school and the city and never left. So this is my 18th year of working with Morristown Beard students, and so excited that you're starting your journey in this college search process. I think if you've taken away anything from at least the beginning of this, there is a lot of uncertainty about the process. And the answer is oftentimes it depends. But one of the ways you can be a little bit more certain about the process is making sure that you're really focusing on finding the right fit. And that process of starting off that college search starts with you. This has really got to start with a process of self-reflection. You have got to know yourself, your hopes, your dreams, your strengths, your weaknesses, before you can then decide what's going to be the right fit between you and your future college home. So the moment you've all been dreading, you've really got to do some inner reflection here. So those of you that are who have been journaling for a while, you might be at an advantage to this in this case. So I want you to think about some of the things that you love about Morristown Beard School. Some of the factors that drew you to the school in the first place, that really excite you about the school. And normally I would ask for some audience participation in response. You're just going to have to yell out into the void of your living room and assume that I'm hearing that. Maybe you love the small classes. Maybe you love the attention from teachers. Maybe you love that strong sense of community. Maybe you love supportive coaches. Maybe you love the fine arts experience. Whatever it is, think about the things that you really love about your high school. I also want you to think about some of the things that you wish would change. And I'm not going to give you set examples for that, but I want you to think about some of the things that maybe are not your favorite, that if you were headmaster of the day, what would you wave your magic wand and look about it and think about it and change? Now, I also want you to think about in the past, and this may or may not be pre-COVID, think about your very best day. Maybe that's in school, maybe that's from a summer experience. Normally I would say think about your best day at school, but I know things have been a little rocky the last couple of months with COVID, and school has had some ups and downs that may be a little bit untraditional. So think about your very best day. What's the day that you woke up before your alarm went off, you couldn't wait to get started? And now I want you to think about, why was that the case? What was it that you were so excited about? And then let's see if we can extrapolate some of those things into your college experience, so that the majority of your 4 years of college are days that you can't wait to get started. Similarly, let's do the flip side. What's the day where you drug your feet? You hit the alarm, the snooze button on your alarm over and over and over again. You really didn't want to get out of bed and get started. Try to separate the COVID lifestyle from just your overall experience, because things will hopefully settle down with COVID by the time you're experiencing your college life. So what are some things that really, you were not super excited about? Because those are things you're going to want to try to maybe avoid in your college search experience. All right, so you've got to start with this process of self-reflection. Think about how you learn best. Do you like small classes? Do you like the idea of anonymity in a larger classroom setting? Do you want to be surrounded by students who are smarter than you? Is that going to push you to be your best? Or do you want to be the smartest person in the room? What are you looking for socially? What kinds of activities and experiences are you looking for socially? Do you want to be a big fish in a smaller pond, or a little fish in a bigger pond? What does that look like? Do you want that kind of engagement in the classroom, kind of engagement on a campus setting? Do you like the idea of rural, suburban, urban? Kind of try to play through those scenarios in your mind and think about it. And then I want you to talk to your friends. I want you to talk to your friends who have already started college. I want you to talk to your teachers. I want you to talk to your neighbors with masks 6 feet apart. I want you to talk to the postal worker, the grocery store clerk, your parents' friends, everybody that you meet, and ask, where did you go to college? Because I bet they're going to name some places that are not even on your radar. And then ask, what do they love about their college experience? I think you're going to be surprised by some of the answers, because I think a lot of their answers are going to be nothing that can be measured by US News and World Report rankings. In fact, a lot of them are going to be more about experiences. And so I'm going to give you a couple of suggestions for you to think about that. The National Survey for Student Engagement, NSSE, N-S-S-E, National Survey for Student Engagement, measures not just a rank order of random statistics that may or may not be helpful in your own college experience, but measures actual student involvement engagement. Did you have a meaningful internship experience? Did you engage in a meaningful service learning or research opportunity? Did you have a mentor, a faculty or staff person that you would consider a mentor? Did you get involved with clubs or activities? Did you take on leadership positions with those clubs and activities? And really see what that kind of level of engagement first year, second year, third year, and fourth year looked like, because it's going to look different and opportunities are going to be different at different types of institutions. So NSSE might be one resource for you beyond those US News and World Report rankings that I would like to just throw out the window. And then Jeff mentioned in his section that colleges and universities really had to become rich with online content, particularly in March, but we've gotten even better with it over the course of the summer and this fall. And so the opportunities for you to visit campus may be limited in person. Many college campuses are not currently open for campus visitors. If they are open for campus visitors, they're focused on current seniors right now. So you may have limited opportunities, particularly right now, to visit campus, let alone the fact whether you're comfortable health-wise or not to make those kinds of visits. But every college and university is just filling opportunities with virtual visits, webinar recordings, special interest webinars, and the opportunity to really engage with community members. In fact, never has it been easier to try to understand a culture of a school virtually because of where we are. And so take advantage of those virtual visits. And oftentimes those have current students engaged. Check on school websites. The opportunity to chat with a current student, with a faculty member, with a staff member of an area of interest of yours is very accessible now, probably in ways that those opportunities weren't accessible even 6 months ago. And so use those. And then if you're sitting here trying to figure out, well, what kinds of questions do I ask on these virtual visits? Don't worry, your predecessors ahead of you were also curious about what questions to ask when they were visiting on campus as well. Your college counseling office can provide that information. If you do a Google search, you will also get some information about that. But one of my favorite resources is the Colleges That Change Lives website, ctcl.org. The Colleges That Change Lives is focused on smaller liberal arts and sciences colleges and the value of a liberal arts and sciences education. But even if you do not think that you were interested in liberal arts and sciences colleges, there's still some great resources on that website about a student-centered college search. And they have a whole list of really interesting questions that were based off those NSSE results to really find out about student engagement. So take those questions and ask them on your virtual visits. Ask them on your conversations with admission counselors when we do virtual high school visits and virtual college fairs. Ask them when you sign up to do a chat or a text bot message with current students or faculty. Ask them when you participate in specific areas of interest, meet your majors programs or academic specific programs or music or coach meetings virtually. Take advantage of all of those. And then finally, one more resource that you probably haven't thought about, especially as a high school student, is LinkedIn. Students, you probably don't have a LinkedIn account. I wouldn't be at all surprised, but I bet your parents might have a LinkedIn account. And LinkedIn is traditionally used if you're thinking about the job search, but it's also a really fascinating tool to find out where people go to college, what they study, and then what jobs they have based on their major. So if you sign up for a LinkedIn account or you hijack your parents' LinkedIn account, you can do searches and find out every alum from X university that studied philosophy, and find out what part of the country they live in, what kinds of professional sectors they're working in, what kinds of jobs they might have. So you can find out, what do you do with a philosophy degree? The answer is anything you want, but it's hours of fascinating fun to do some searches based on areas of interest that you might be experiencing. Or if one of those people that you ask about their college experience lists a college that you're less familiar with, you can do some behind the scenes diving into what their alumni communities are doing. Of course, every college and university also offers that information somewhere in their website, but LinkedIn kind of puts it all together in an unofficial manner, but a pretty interesting way to dive in. So first process, think about yourself, reflect on yourself. Second step, think about your best and worst days, moments, experiences, and how you can translate the best into your next 4 years of college. And then talk to people, talk to everybody you know, explore, sign up for those virtual opportunities, and talk and get to know those folks to really try to understand the culture of a community. I wish you the very best of luck in your college search. It can be so much fun. Even if you're not getting to travel right now quite as much as you were hoping to, you can still have a lot of fun and enjoy it. So I hope you do, and I'm going to pass it over to Lowell to talk more about those personal components of the application process.
And thank you, Lauren, for that. Lauren used one of my favorite words in this process, fit. And so much of this process is about this small 3-letter word, fit. Lauren talked about the idea of fit from your side of things. And now I and then Francisco after me are going to talk about kind of the fit from the school side of things. And I'm going to start by basically giving you a blanket disclaimer here, which is that every school does things differently. Every single school has different priorities, different things that they value, different things that they look at, how they read applications, what the list goes on and on. And so take everything I say in kind of the context of, if you're curious about that, this is what your college counseling staff is for. They are the experts. They are knowledgeable. They know the institutions. You've heard their introductions. They have worked on our side of things, but even beyond that, they're the ones having these kind of dialogues, these conversations with us as things change, whether it's COVID related or just general college landscape. So just know that what is the right fit for one school may not necessarily be the right fit for another school, and things change. What I really want to talk about, I think if you were to ask any single one of us four, or basically any single college counselor ever, what is the most common question you get? And what is your least favorite question that you get? And they're one and the same, which is, how do I get into your school? And the reason we hate that question is because, one, we're not allowed to tell you the answer to that question, but two, there's also not really an answer to that question. Every school, when they're looking at students, typically likes to take a pretty wide-ranging look at what you're offering. The phrase holistic review, you're going to hear a lot in the next 2 years or whatever it is. And this is kind of the idea that I'm driving at here, is the idea that we're interested in a lot more than just evaluating you based on a particular set of criteria. I've worked in the Wake Forest admissions office for 6 years. When I started working there, I was convinced that there was this magic formula that you could put numbers into and it would spit back a yes or a no. And I think, as my colleagues will tell you, that is grossly untrue. There's so much more that goes into any sort of college application reading. And a lot of it is based on personal criteria. And so that's really what I'm going to be honing in on right now. There are a lot of ways for you to be able to showcase that. Every school will have different ways for you to be able to do it. Some schools, it's the big personal statement that you're going to fill out on the Common App. Pretty much every school is going to have some variant of that, whether you fill out the Common App or even a different application. Some schools offer supplemental essays. Some schools offer interviews. Some schools require extra teacher recommendations or extra character recommendations, things like that. All of these are ways from the college side of things that we want to use to get to know you better. And so the way that you kind of approach this from your angle, I think there is a little bit of a temptation to look at it from the college side and say, okay, what do they want to see from me? Do they want to know all the really amazing things that I've done? And if I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, we know that you're 16 years old. We know that you have had a number of opportunities based on your school, of course, but that we're not expecting you to have climbed Mount Everest at this point. We're not expecting you to have cured cancer. That's unreasonable. And so we know that, and we have healthy expectations for what a student in your situation may have the opportunity to do. But a lot of what we're looking at is just, who are you? And to that end, I think the mindset that you can really fall into a trap with is, we don't want to know some fictional version of yourself that you think is going to impress us. That person is not going to step foot on our campus because that person doesn't exist. We are genuinely interested in getting to know you as you. And I feel pretty comfortable saying this, that there are 130 people in attendance right now. All 130 people, whether it's parents, whether it's current students, every single person has done something awesome in their life, something that they can be proud of. Maybe it's not something that you think you should feel proud of, just something that you would do normally, but I guarantee you've done some pretty cool things in your life. Talk about it. Talk about the things that define who you are. All of these opportunities, the interviews, supplemental questions, the personal statement, even at who you ask for your teacher recommendations. I think it's really healthy for you to view these as opportunities. Opportunities for you to impress people like us, to make us want to say, I want this person on my campus. And so if you think about it in kind of a holistic way of, I want to showcase my best attributes, I want to showcase the things that I'm proud of, how you start planning and allotting the limited space that you have, whether it's any of these kind of opportunities, that's how you start creating this really, really strong application itself. Do you ask a teacher who you've had a strong academic performance in, or if your academic performance is maybe kind of what we call the upward trend? Do you want a teacher that focuses on the growth that you had in the terms of the class? Do you want to get your coach's recommendation because you really want to stress your extracurricular activities, what you'll bring to a campus in that regard? That is entirely up to you. But from your perspective, what you really need to know, there's no right or wrong answer to how you do it. It is entirely a question of, who am I? What do I believe in? What are I consider my strengths to be? And how can I show this school my strengths in such a way that they're going to be impressed? And just in terms of the personal side of things, we want to be impressed. We really do. The reason we're all in this industry is because we like finding out about cool things that young people do. I think pretty much the highlight of all of our jobs is living through and seeing what are the cool things that you're doing. So just think about it in that perspective, and you'll be fine in terms of how you approach kind of the personal side of things. And now I'm going to turn it over to Francisco, who's going to talk about the academic side of things.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So the next part I'm going to talk about is, as Lowell said, the academics of the application review. So the academics, I think, are sometimes one of the maybe more, or not more important, but I would say that more heavily weighed pieces of the application review, because this is where a college is really going to see how you as a student are performing academically, but then also how you might handle the academic rigor of that particular school. So first up is the transcript. This is the part of the application that I think really helps indicate how you perform in the classroom. So typically when reviewing a transcript, I think colleges will mostly focus on, what are your core classes? So your English, your math, your social studies, your science, your foreign language courses across your 9th, 10th, and 11th year grades. Some schools will also take other classes into account. So it's definitely always important to find out, exactly what classes a college will be looking at during the evaluation. Now, it's also important to note that, when looking at a transcript, some schools will take the weighted GPA and some will take the unweighted GPA. Regardless of that, I think when looking at grades, it's safe to say that, most colleges are looking for, A's and B's across the transcript. We just want to see, for the most part, good grades. However, looking at grade trends is also a really important factor when evaluating a transcript. We on the admission side, we understand that sometimes, you might have had maybe a rocky start to high school, or maybe there was 1 year where you moved and so you had to change schools and that transition proved to be a little difficult at first. Or maybe there was just, a period of time where, you were dealing with some things personally that maybe could have affected your grades. And what better example than this year, with COVID and everything that really just kind of disrupted all of our lives in many ways. So in general, I think colleges would like to see, an overall upward trend. We'd like to see that growth, as Lowell mentioned earlier. And should there be any of those circumstances that you maybe feel as a student could have affected your grades at some point, I always encourage students, to really share that with your admission counselors. That information is really helpful in helping giving context to any dips or maybe any inconsistencies that you have had over your 3 years or 4 years in high school. Now, the rigor of the courses is also something that will be taken into account when evaluating the transcript. This could be honors, it could be AP classes, maybe you've taken some dual enrolled courses. Colleges like to see when a student tries to challenge themselves a little bit with some of these more difficult courses. Now, with that being said, I would not encourage a student to overwork themselves in taking honors and AP classes that could really end up resulting in some subpar grades. I think it's much better to see a student doing well in maybe more standard courses than really struggling and possibly failing some of those honors and AP classes. Now, colleges also will look at the rigor. Will also look at not only the rigor of the courses, but just the overall rigor of the high school. So as admission counselors, it's kind of our job to become familiar with our schools and really learn about the types of classes that are offered and just how rigorous the curriculum is at each high school. Now, I think the final piece of the academics part of the application is test scores, SAT and or ACT. So what's important to know first off, I think, is that every college is going to be different as to how they view scores, how they accept them, what scores are they looking at, of course. So for example, at Rollins, we superscore the SAT. However, we do not superscore the ACT. We're only looking at the composite score on the ACT. So you'll definitely want to research, do research on each college that you're applying to, and in order to see just how they assess your test scores. Some colleges will also let you to self-report your test scores, and then some schools might require the official report coming from the College Board. Now, in the age of COVID, testing has become difficult. We've seen that test states are getting canceled, that they're filling up very quickly. And we understand that that's going to be, probably a reality for the next year or so. And so just know that, us on the admission side, us on the college side, we know this, we understand it. And so as Jeff mentioned earlier, to really kind of help with that, a lot of schools have started going test optional, so you can apply without your test scores. And in a lot of ways, that really doesn't hinder hinder your chances of being admitted. But really it allows the colleges to look a little bit more deeply into those other personal components of the application, such as your extracurriculars, your rec letters, your essay, kind of that extra piece where we can learn more about you as a student, kind of just a little more than just outside of a testing site. And I think another thing that some schools are doing is just being much more flexible in terms of receiving test scores. So for example, I know some colleagues at other institutions that are allowing students to submit test scores late into spring, just to allow students more opportunities to try to take the SAT and the ACT. And at Rollins, we actually are allowing students to submit their test scores all the way up until April. So really giving students plenty of opportunity to try to take the tests so that, if it is part of the application that you want to submit, you have the opportunity to do so. So once again, just, really encourage you to research, what are the test score submission policies that all the schools that you're looking to apply to. So with that being said, I think some of the main takeaways that I have just in terms of the academic piece of an application review is, to just do your best in school. Like I said, we definitely want to see, your best grades. So, try hard, do well, but also to share as much information with the college that you can in regards to any factors that could have affected your grades. To also find out exactly what each college you're applying to requires, and what they look at when they're reviewing academics. So whether that be the weighted or the unweighted GPA, which classes are they looking at when they're reviewing the transcript? How are they assessing test scores, and how are they recording the test scores, whether it's SuperScore or not? How can scores be submitted? And also, if schools are going to be test optional, how long will they be? So all of that will really kind of help play into the overall review in terms of the academics when you're working on your application.
Thank you, Fran. And thank you all of the college representatives for sharing their insights and all of the information that they presented this evening. No matter how long I've been doing this, I always feel like I come out of this type of program with more information, more wonderful resources. And I know that right now we're sharing a lot of information, and there's a lot of data that's coming at you. We've talked about the common application and early decision versus early action. And please know that these are conversations we will continue to have, and we will sort through the logistics and the specifics of things, and know that your resources are available to you. So I just wanted to share a few of our next steps and kind of how we're going to continue working on the process through the college office, and before we get to some questions. So first of all, students should have been given, their advisors should have handed out a folder of resources and information from our office. So there's some paperwork in there, that information about the junior checklist, how to access the questionnaire that I'll speak about in just a moment, test prep resources. Please know that all of these resources are available electronically, and if you are a virtual student, we can share those with you. Please reach out to your counselor. You should have received an email from the individual this week with information about that, but do not hesitate to reach out. We can absolutely share that with you. Also, through the parent portal, there are some outstanding resources through the college counseling portion of that. So the information is available in multiple sources, but never hesitate to reach out if you have questions or need some information. So I mentioned the questionnaire, and the questionnaire is located within Naviance. So one of the things that I really liked what Lauren from Rhodes stated was talking about this period of self-reflection. And for our office, the student and parent questionnaire is a time for you to kind of capture that reflection and to share that with us. So these questionnaires are valuable resources for us as we work with you throughout the entire process, going to one of the words that Lowell used, and fit, and helping us to discover the right fit for you. We need to get a little bit more, even though we know you, but we want to know more about you. There are often stories that you might share within the questionnaire that we will incorporate into our letters of recommendation, and that's for both parents and children. So we want to make sure that we're getting as much information that we can to help us to make a really strong relationship, but also to find that right fit for you. So the questionnaire is located within Naviance. So all of you have access to your Naviance account. Students, many of you used it to sign up for your college representative visits this fall. And it is the database that we will use. There were instructions on how to access that questionnaire within the folder. And again, available on the website too. If you have questions about accessing your Naviance account, please feel free to reach out. We will reset passwords. Parents and students have separate Naviance accounts, so please keep that in mind. And there is a separate questionnaire. There's a parent questionnaire and there's a student questionnaire. And so we do ask that both of you complete this separately. You can talk amongst yourselves if you want, or you can not share at all. everybody kind of has their different process. A couple of things that I want to note on that: when you're working on your questionnaire, save often. It will expire after a certain time, and information will then be deleted. So my recommendation is to hit save pretty frequently, or if you're working on it, copy and paste it into the questionnaire, but just making sure that you save often. I can't say that enough. That questionnaire for the students is going to be the tool that we use to kind of get you, it's kind of your key to the first college counseling appointment, our individual one-on-one appointment. So once we will start working with those individual meetings in January, we'll start scheduling those in earnest at that point. So I would recommend that you don't rush the questionnaire. You take the time to reflect and think about it and answer the questions. So over the Thanksgiving break, the winter break even is another great time to work on it. And like I said, we'll begin those one-on-one sessions in earnest in January. And that gives us time to really get to know you and to work together on that. That doesn't mean that we're not available for questions prior to that. So if you have questions, please feel free to reach out. Just understand that, as many of our admission representatives mentioned, we're continuing to finalize our process with seniors as they're working toward any December deadlines or those January 1st regular decision deadlines. So we're continuing to edit their supplemental essays, and as the decisions release from colleges from the early process, assessing and helping them make their final decision. So between kind of Thanksgiving and January, we're continuing to work with those seniors and helping them through their process. But yes, please feel free to reach out with questions. And the last thing that I wanted to mention, because I know there are a lot of questions about testing. We've heard that from our representatives this evening. In the folder, there is a list of the SAT and ACT dates, as we know. You will notice on there that Morristown Baird is committed to offering school day testing, for one for the SAT and one for the ACT. So we will have the school day testing in April and March. And so more information about that will follow, but know that we will have that resource available to our students. As we know, it continues to change, and we are in regular communication with our admission representatives to make sure that we have the most accurate and up-to-date information about those schools that will be test optional, those that might have that 3-year pilot program of being test optional, or those that will return to requiring the testing. And that's something that we will continue to evaluate with you as we go through this process. And with that, I am going to now go to Ms. Lasky, and I think we'll all come back on screen.
Great. I'm just going to give that a second to occur. Excellent. All right. I think hopefully people's faces are starting to pop up. I'm not quite sure if you're all seeing the same thing on my end. But yeah, as Mrs. Johnson said, we're certainly aware of the frustrations with testing. And I wanted to say thank you to all of you who submitted questions ahead of time. We had some really great questions in there. We're going to get to as many of them as we can. As we anticipated, our wonderful panelists actually ended up addressing many of them in their presentations. So I'll try not to rehash too many of those, but certainly testing, like I said, is a concern on many of your minds. And I was hoping to actually toss this one back to Jeff at Boston College. As you said, I know that, Boston College has always had a pretty strong focus on testing, or it's played a significant role in the process. So I'm just curious, what conversations have you been having in your office about, like you said, what is there something that's going to replace the testing, or what things might carry a little bit more weight this year?
Thanks for the question, Lauren. Yeah, it's interesting. We're just trying to get through this year, right? But it's nice to be able to talk to some juniors here and just try to give you as much information as we can. But as you've all said, it's still, if anybody says they can predict the future in this world, they're not being genuine. But anyhow, I think we've always tried to look at the transcript first and foremost. We have used standardized testing in a very meaningful way in our review process, but it never trumped the transcript. So sort of looking at that, and I'll just say, we do have a supplemental essay question beyond the Common App, and I would just say, just speaking for myself personally as a reader, I think if a student wasn't quite as successful with that, but wasn't unsuccessful, but not quite successful, I kind of overlooked that. You know, that it was fine. But I think we're looking a little more closely at that this year because we have to replace a huge data point. And so you definitely read essays sometimes, supplemental essays to Boston College, and I'm sure colleagues with other additional essay questions might feel the same way, that are just kind of uninspired compared to other applicants. And I think we might be taking a little bit more note of that. At least I'm just speaking for myself personally, when reading applications.
That's great. Thank you so much. That's really helpful. One of the other questions that came in, and just a heads up, Lowell, this one's going to be coming your way. I know that WAKE has been test optional for quite a while now. And, I know that in the past we've had students where if their test scores are strong and indicative of, what they are where they'd like for them to be, obviously we'd encourage them to send them. And if they're not the best representation, maybe not so much, but I was just wondering if you could speak to, how should juniors approach their testing plan without knowing, if colleges are going to be test optional. Some might be doing it for 1 year, some might be, doing this permanently, or if they would even benefit from undergoing a test optional review. So I guess in other words, should everyone still try to test? What's your advice there?
I definitely think everyone should still try to test, simply because there's no guarantee. It may turn out to be inconvenient, and as Jeff said, anyone who says they know what the future is going to bring is lying to you. Think back to where we were 8 months ago. It feels like 10 years ago. Things can change very quickly, and I think it's better to be safe than sorry. And so even if not every single school on your list or every single school on your list is going test optional, it's still a data point that can work in your favor if you test well in something that you're proud of. Plus, you'll be prepared for schools that maybe decide not to go test optional. So I definitely think better safe than sorry with regards to testing. We do recognize, I think everyone on our side of the desk recognizes that it can pose frustration is a good word. It can be difficult to manage with regards to travel restrictions and things like that, much less social distancing guidelines. All the schools are going to be taking that into account in this process. We're people too. We're undergoing the same moments that you are. We recognize the frustrations, and we will craft our policies on the college side of things, bearing in mind that the changes, whatever they may be, with regards to kind of this or any other challenges that may arise in the coming months.
That's great. Thank you so much. That's great advice, certainly for our students and families, dealing with that uncertainty. So I think that sort of finishes off our testing questions. Now, I wanted to ask a question of Lauren. She did a wonderful job talking about sort of the search process and what are some other things that you can be looking for, which was actually, we thought we had come up with this very clever question to ask, what else should people be considering that they often overlook, but you pretty much addressed so many of those. I love the LinkedIn idea and the NESI and some of the other resources, which again, if you missed any of those, your college counselor will be thrilled to tell you all about those. But I'm wondering, maybe it's just on my mind a little bit more with Thanksgiving coming up, but, I think there's almost sometimes too many voices coming in the college search. So when you're working with students and families who are convinced that they have to go to this certain school, or maybe the parent or the grandparent, how do you encourage students to tune out unhelpful advice in the process?
A really great question. And I'm glad you asked it, especially since my advice was talk to everybody. And I think right now, especially I feel like when you're sophomores, you can be like, it's too early, I don't know, and just roll on with it. Especially moving into Thanksgiving and winter holidays. Parents, this is where you can be really, really helpful. You absolutely should run interference on these conversations. I think it takes a lot for a student to be able to say, Aunt Susie, I don't really want to talk about college right now. Uncle Joe, I don't know what I want to major in. I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. And that's totally okay. Frankly, you shouldn't know what you want to be when you grow up, because chances are it's going to change even once you get to college, especially once you get to college and after you graduate. So students, if you are comfortable being confident and standing up for yourself, I think it's perfectly accessible to practice in the mirror ahead of time and say, this isn't really something I want to talk about right now. I'm still exploring my options. I don't know, and leave it at that. But parents, this is also a really good time where you can step in and say, we're not really going to talk about college over the holidays, and make that a safe space. And honestly, this is going to steal into my piece of advice later on, but I think use this opportunity to set parameters and set guidelines about when you talk about college, how often it's going to come up. And I think a lot of us would agree, set a specific time of the week, perhaps, that is the college opportunity, the time to talk about college. Students, you have the ability to bring college up whenever you want to, but parents or family members or guardians, you know that maybe we only talk about college Sunday night dinner and that's it. And that way nobody gets a sneak attack or surprise bombardment about college shock when they weren't ready for it. So as a family, this is a really good time to set some parameters about college talk, and then definitely going into the holidays, set those parameters too.
Absolutely. I like that a lot. I like the idea of sort of setting aside, designating, okay, this is our college time and everything else. Let's, hopefully spend that time having meaningful family experiences, especially as, for those parents out there, your students are getting ready to go off to college. So hopefully you can, make the most of that time you have left. So one question we got, obviously a number of questions about what are visits, obviously visit opportunities right now at many campuses are limited. And, again, going back to the idea of sort of the crystal ball or being able to predict the future, it is hard to say, but, for Fran, just as a heads up, I'll be tossing this one your way. I'm curious as to, with if there are students who can't come to campus, I know that, some schools out there put an emphasis on, demonstrated interest. That's something our families, hear about a lot, showing that getting a sense of a campus without, or how do you get it? I guess we've already addressed, how do you get a sense of the campus if you can't visit in person with all the wonderful online opportunities. But I was wondering, if you could talk a little bit about how does, if demonstrated interest is something that families are concerned about, how can a student show that in the time of COVID?
Yeah, good question. I think just a big resource is just your college admission counselor. So reaching out to your admission counselor, starting that introduction, that conversation where hey, I'm looking at your school, I'm really interested. That's great, at least for especially for us, because we love when we can develop more of that personal relationship with with our students. So getting to know you, but then also being a resource to help answer any questions that you have, whether that's via email. And now in COVID world, we're doing phone calls, we're texting, we're, I'm video chatting with students. So that's also one thing too, that, to know that I think just about every school is kind of trying to use almost any avenue that we can to connect with you, to meet with students from where you are, from the comfort of your home. So, definitely reach out to your counselors and find out, what are some other ways that I can learn more about the campus, whether that is, a virtual campus tour, maybe it's a video chat with a current student where you can kind of, pick their brain and kind of figure out, learn more about the student experience from, someone who's actually a student at the time. Also, a lot of schools are, going and doing virtual open houses, maybe in the spring doing virtual mid-student days. So, I think just in this COVID world, we really are trying, like I said, utilize everything that we can, and trying to make every touch point that you normally would have with a school as accessible to everyone, through virtual visits, or maybe in person too. But I think my big thing is just, reach out to your admission counselor and kind of use them as the jumping up point from, where can I go from here and what can I learn next?
I love that. That's great. Yeah, you're right. I think that's something, we don't always think of, but yeah, just reaching out to the admissions rep, they're always going to be that best person to really talk to. So thank you for that. Let's see. So we did get some questions, and actually, Lowell, and I know you spoke about this a little bit in talking about the personal side and determining fit that way. Obviously a number of our students are concerned that their extracurricular activity list is going to look very different, starting from the spring and into this fall, and, hopefully not too much longer, but really who can say? So, I guess what advice would you give to those students who are worried about if their list that, the activities list, the resume is going to look different? And, is there anything that students should be thinking about? So I guess, how is your review maybe of that piece of it changing, if it will at all? And what would you say to students who are concerned about, using their time wisely outside of the classroom?
Sure. So as I said earlier, we know what's going on. We're not living under a rock, and we recognize that there are limits with regards to what you're going to be able to do. in your high school. I think it's important. I think I don't want to speak for my colleagues or for any other school, but I do feel comfortable saying that it's not that we're judging you on a scale based on the students from 5 years ago or anything like that, based on, oh, you weren't captain of your team like this person was or something like that. We recognize that everyone is facing different challenges now. And so there are going to be limits on what you're going to be able to do, but we all know that. And so we recognize that, particularly for a school that's been in such a hard hit area like MBS has been, the limits that go with restrictions on public gatherings, restrictions on just quarantine, travel restrictions, things like that. I think people on our end of the thing, our end of this process, we're going to take the time to kind of get to know the context of that, get to know, to understand just what limitations there are. You know, I mentioned earlier that we have these open kind of conversations with your counseling staff, and we do. And a large part of that is to understand what changes have been at the school in the past year. You know, none of us are going to presume that things are remaining the exact same even at a school like MBS. We recognize that there are going to be new classes offered and new teachers, and sometimes things change in the other direction as well with regards to limits. And so, again, if you have concerns about that, talk to your counselors. They can allay those concerns to us and provide context for what we're reading. I think pretty much every college worth its salt, any college counselor worth his or her salt, is going to be having those conversations because that helps us make good decisions on our end. But as far as the general question, just know that we are not basing this off of like a strict criteria of captain, president, vice president, etc. So it's not like we're looking for particular things for you to be able to check off without recognizing that there's context that in many cases is going to prevent students from being able to do those things this year and future years possibly as well.
Absolutely. That's great. Thank you. Yeah, the flexibility piece is so important, you know, this year more so than ever. So thank you for that. Hopefully that calms some nerves in the audience. So Lauren, I'd like to turn this question over to you now. At this point, we just sort of have I would refer to as a grab bag of assorted questions. But a student did bring this up, and I was glad to see that, you know, this is something that a lot of them are thinking about. But, you know, you know, what are the conversations happening on your campus? And again, if anyone else would like to chime in, they're welcome to as well. But regarding, you know, diversity, equity, and inclusion, you know, what have you been seeing, you know, since especially over the summer, you know, through now, you know, what efforts is the college, I guess, doing to make sure that inclusion is something that is prioritized? And, you know, what are the students doing at the same time?
Excellent question. So Rhodes is located in Memphis, Tennessee, a city with some rich civil rights history, and one of the few majority cities in the U.S. And so it's a really interesting place to be poised as for having some of these conversations. Rhodes is also completely virtual this fall. And so a lot of the conversations that would be very actively had on our campus are having to be moved into a virtual forum. So it doesn't have quite the same feel, as you can imagine, but those conversations are still very much happening. We have a chief diversity officer position that was created relatively recently. And Dr. Turner has been instrumental in creating Instagram spaces and takeovers where we could talk about Black Lives Matter and some of the protests that were happening, conversations about what does it look like in Memphis, past, present, and future in terms of police brutality, in terms of protests, in terms of health equity and disparities based on race. And so we've been able to create some really interesting webinars and meetings and conversations and weekly discussion groups and roundtable conversations and all sorts of variety of things to have some of these conversations about making sure that every student, staff, and faculty member truly feels welcome on the Rhodes campus. There is still a lot of work to do, but it is very much the top of our president's strategic plan. And if you go to our Rhodes website, it's actually highlighted at the very top to see some of these diversity, inclusion, and access initiatives. So it's something that's very much on the top of our minds from the administration through to the students, even if we have to have those conversations virtually.
All right, that's great. Thank you so much. Now, I am going to apologize. It's going to be a very abrupt transition for the next couple of questions. So actually, let's see, Jeff, this next one I have is for you. So I was wondering, I know you sort of spoke a little bit about the state of college admissions on, under COVID. What do you envision that maybe any of the new practices that you've put into place as a result of the pandemic continuing into the future? For example, I know you mentioned that you love to get back on the road and do those in-person high school visits. Is there any, will you still, is the looking ahead, do you think that's something you would like to get back to? Is that something that maybe, where there'll be more virtual opportunities in the future? Just again, impossible to predict at this point, but I'm curious if there's anything that was put into place in the past, 8 months or so that you hope will be able to stick around.
Right. Yeah. Lauren, thanks so much for the question. I was actually with a panel of colleagues a week or so ago, and there was some disagreement over that. So it's going to be interesting how schools move forward with sort of on-campus programming. But I think what we've learned about virtual and the ways that we can connect with students virtually will continue, will be a legacy of this. I hope that it's more of a supplementary part of our outreach. I'll be honest, I just, these virtual visits this season have not been as fulfilling. I think it's tough for me personally to make connections with students and establish trust virtually compared to what we were able to do in person. So I hope there are opportunities to connect one-on-one, but I think at the very least, I think we're going to be anxious to get students back on our campuses. And to this point, really, the priority has been the health and safety of our current students for those of us who are on campus in person. So we've really been mandated to not be open and not to be hosting prospective students. I mean, we don't have a fence. There have been, I think, families sort of doing unofficial tours, but certainly nothing official. But I think for all of us, we believe in our campuses as a selling feature, and I think we're able to change students' minds, or they become more interested when they get on our campus. So as soon as it's safe to do so, or even if we have to take precautions and get a little creative to comply with state or local ordinances, I predict, we'll see, after saying all night that anybody who predicts anything is a liar, which I agree with, I think there will be some on-campus visit opportunities, certainly this summer and maybe this spring, if we see improvement in COVID at the national level.
Yeah, we hope so as well, and I know many of our families do, but no one can hold that, hold Jeff to it. If anything changes, it's certainly not.
The recording button is taunting me right now, so.
Absolutely, completely fair. All right, let's see. Okay, so I think I'd like to ask one more question, and then I'm actually going to ask sort of a roundtable style question of all of you. But so, Fran, you kicked or at the you spoke a little bit about the academic piece, and one of the things I really appreciate about Rollins is that I feel like and many of our colleagues here tonight, but at your school, you genuinely take the time to get to know the schools that you're reading for and things like that. So how do you get a sense of those nuances of a we're obviously a small private school, where how many high schools are right near us in the area that all have very different curricula and different offerings. And so, what tools do you have at your disposal? How do you get a sense of what a rigorous curriculum here versus another school? What does that look like? What is your process like?
Yeah, so I think for me personally, I mean, it's unfortunately this year, no fall travel or anything like that. But my first couple of years working in admission, I really learned a lot just visiting the schools, talking with college counselors, and really just soaking in as much as I could about their particular school, their curriculum, their offerings, their student body, things like that. And I think I remember my first couple of years too. When application reading season would begin, I would spend a good couple minutes just looking over the school profile, where I could really go into detail as to, okay, this school offers honors case, this school doesn't. Okay, this school has a research program that they do in their senior year, and how much work that is. And so I think that's another important piece too, is that I think a lot of times is a part of the application is that school report that us as counselors can really use to, maybe if it's a school that we've have never had a student from before, that we're not familiar with. It'll kind of give us a really good overview as to what is that school all about? What does their student body look like? What are the classes that they offer? Any special programs the school does? So I think that's really been helpful in addition to the conversations with, college counselors.
That's great. Eventually I will figure out this mute button thing. I apologize. But yeah, perfect. That's great. That's certainly something we try to, talk about with our families. So it's good to hear your perspective as well. So at this point, I would like to have our four panelists just share maybe real quick. I know we're, coming up on about 15 minutes till 8 o'clock. What is one piece of advice you'd have for juniors, starting this process, their families? Just maybe, a brief answer. If anyone would like to go first, we can do that, or I'll call on someone teacher style, whatever's easier.
I guess I'll go ahead. My bit of advice is just to have fun with it. This process can feel overwhelming in a lot of ways, but it's also an exciting process. And it's about your future. It's in many ways, this entire process is almost like window shopping, where that uncertainty is a really fun part of it, and it's fun to imagine, and so it's fun to go through your list of schools and to figure out what you want and to try and figure out what the right fit is. It's fun, maybe a little less fun to write the application questions and things like that, but even that can still be kind of fun to think about and to bounce ideas off of your friends and things like that. So just have fun with it. I think on the whole is a good bit of advice.
I'll go next. I would say just, kind of start the process early. I know that, that of course goes without saying, but, really just taking time, to really think about every part of the application, start thinking about maybe, the end of your junior year, which teachers do you want to ask for recommendation letters? Because you don't want to be a Fran who actually applied to Rollins a week before the very last deadline. So I don't think my high school counselor is very happy with me. So, make sure that you stay on your college counselor's good sides. But also, with that being said, don't bombard them too early, trying to get, all that, information in. I know personally, I'll get emails from students in June that are worried about, my college counselor is on summer vacation right now. I can't get a rec letter in. I said, it's okay. They're on vacation because they've earned it. So please just wait for classes to start again. And then you can ask them. So start early, but also, don't be too late.
So my piece of advice was oftentimes set aside designate a specific time where as a family you talk about college. So I kind of shot myself in the foot by giving that earlier. But I will say have some grace in this process, have some grace and compassion with your family, with your teachers and your college counselor, with your admission counselors, but also with yourself, particularly right now. I think COVID-19 has forced all of us to hit the reset button in a way and really take a pause from a lot of things that frankly have made us sad. But hopefully it means that we can really think about the things that we want to bring back into our life as we settle back in. So, don't fall into the trap of having this kind of rat race to become captain of everything or president of everything, even as things start to get back to normal. Really take the time to lean into the things that you find meaningful. And hopefully this experience under the pandemic has given us a chance to hit the reset button and really only bring back the things that we find meaningful into our lives moving forward. And that's something that you'll really be able to talk about and share with us in your application process.
And I'll just say to close, just try to keep an open mind, even after you've made your decision. I think the concept of a dream school is a little bit of a myth because, if you place such lofty expectations on the school of your choice, you're setting it up for failure, because, it might not be attainable. You're not going to know 100% if it's a fit until you're actually there. I like to think that we're the first choice of the students that enroll at Boston College, but I know that's not true for every student. And we win most of them over eventually, and they're happy they're at BC. Conversely, we hear from a number of students after regular decisions go out saying, I am totally sticking on that wait list. I'm coming no matter what. Or if they don't get in, I'm transferring to Boston College. You know it. We hear from a tiny fraction of those students because they're happy with their choice and it's a good fit for them and they move forward. So I would say just keep your expectations reasonable, and I think the goal is I hope you've had a great experience at MBS, right? I hope you're going to be a proud graduate for the rest of your lives. Try to find a college that you feel the same way about. And I'll just end by saying parents and students, just recognize in the spring that maybe not everybody's in the same spot as far as the process. And this doesn't come from me personally. I've heard it over and over again from students. The toughest question to ask some students in the spring or summer is, where are you going? If you could sort of refrain from asking that question, I think that turns down the temperature a lot for students and families.
I will add one last thing, which trust your counselors. You have one of the best counseling staffs in the entire state of New Jersey, maybe in the entire country. Trust them. They are really good at what they do. And I'm not saying that just because they invited us here tonight. I'm saying it's because it's true. So take advantage of their wisdom. Use the resources that they have available to them. But for real, you are in very, very good hands where you are right now.
Thank you so much. And we are so grateful to all of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to be with us here tonight. I truly cannot tell you how much we appreciate it. So thank you for all the advice, all the insight. It has meant the world, I'm sure, to our students and families. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Noreen Cassidy to close us out.
Well, I actually wanted to close things out after Lowell gave that lovely little tribute to us. But our timing is great because we in the College Counseling Office are also starting to hear some vacuuming going on outside the office. But anyway, again, I echo what Lauren said about our thanks to you for spending time with us tonight. And you can see why we value all of these fine professionals as a resource for us. As Mrs. Johnson said, we've thrown a lot of information at you, but know that there's plenty of time to process that information, and we will be here to help you through that. Lowell mentioned having fun with the process. We wouldn't be continuing to do this for so many years if we didn't find it fun, and we're looking forward to to sharing that and having fun with you throughout. As Mrs. Johnson mentioned, we will start our individual meetings in January, but know that we are here to answer any questions. So if you heard something tonight that you want a little bit more clarification on, please don't hesitate to reach out to one of us. You all know who your college counselor is at this point. It may seem like there's a lot ahead of you, and there is to some extent, but one thing I always say to students is, I've been doing this for a long time and it really does always work out. And I will close by hopefully sharing my screen with where we see you in a little less than 2 years. So let's see if this works. There you go. So, we look forward to working with you throughout this process, and we'll see you, in the next couple of days. But of course, have a happy Thanksgiving, and we'll see you when you get back. Thank you.